Hello, welcome once again to the enchanted kingdom of Hermione. We're up here in the turret of pleasure, watching Bristol Blenheims get shot up, and keeping an eye on Bennett's bird feeder, and listening to Rhino Quadio, which is Quadio. There you go, the quad bundles. They keep coming. I think this one's number 8. Quad bundles. Rhino's putting out these Blu-ray discs. I don't even think I mentioned Blu-ray in the last one. They're not CDs, they're Blu-rays. You play them in your Blu-ray player through your surround system, and magically you get perfect quad, unlike in the old days when you had to tweak everything a million sideways, and then maybe it might work halfway as well. And I've been delighting in these things. They're pure nostalgia, which normally I abhor. But you get to hear, it's really reintroduced me to some music I'd kind of forgotten about. The quad era was about 1970 to 77 max. And a lot of records came out in quad. The problem with the records was they were not compatible. So the ones done by RCA Warner Brothers were on a CD4 format, which used a completely different principle than the CBS SQ system, which was a quote-unquote matrix system, which was also what Sansui's QS system was, but QS and SQ didn't work together, and it was a fucking disaster. And so, of course, it died. And it got replaced by Universal Dolby 5.1, which we have now used for God knows how long, and which works great, except you need even more speakers. Back in the day, the idea that you had to add 2 more speakers, a lot of people went, oh, God. I, on the other hand, thought this was a terrific idea. And over the years, I've amassed a pretty good little quad collection on records. These things are great because they take all the muss and fuss out of it. Now, as I've mentioned, and if you've seen the last video, which was probably not too long ago, I've gone through all my bitches. These are imperfect, but I love them. And a real surprise one to open this one is ZZ Top, Tres Hombres. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this to be a real eyebrow raiser for us quad nuts. First of all, old people will remember that ZZ Top were on London Records, which was the same label the Stones were on, and which was a derivative of the British Decca label. And Decca never did quad, in England at least, and London didn't get into the quad disc. Like, everybody had to kind of choose sides. Which system are you going to use, to maximize the customer availability? London never made that choice. They just said, we're not going to make records. But because they had their tapes done by Ampex, they came up with some quad tapes, 8 tracks. And this was one of them. And this was an absolute delight to find. Because now, there's a couple of things. First of all, again, I guess they're not allowed to use the London logo. So they have resorted to using the, let's just call it fucking dreadful, Warner Records logo. Who came up with this logo? And why can't they use the old Warner Brothers logo? I mean, I guess they can't. I don't know. Frustrating as hell for us nerds, because that looks like dog shit. You can tell it's the later Warner's label, which probably would be accurate, because when ZZ Top, when their contract ran out with London, or I think London might have dissolved actually, they moved lock, stock, and barrel to Warner Brothers along with their catalog. And so this did come out on Warner Brothers, but if you got a Warner Brothers copy, it's not a first pressing, because the first pressing, now this, okay, finally I give them this. Now apparently there's a great story behind this one. This is how you bought it in quad in 1973. The only way you could buy it in quad. Might have come out in 8-track cartridge too. But there you go, Ampex, there it is. Look at all the information. That is it. That's all you get. That's so great. Just shut up and spool it onto your 4-channel discrete. Now, in 1973, this would have sounded so great. You do get the wonderful inside photo. You get there wasn't a lot to this record anyway. You get the fucking now unnecessary quadradisc stuff. You get the punk rock back cover, if you will. And, yeah, and you get the original back cover, which is the only place you'll get the writing credits. So bring your magnifying glass. Now, the thing is, this is great, because Warner's was like, oh, too bad we can't find this. They couldn't find the Quadmaster for this, because, of course, it wasn't a Warner Quadmaster, it was a London Quadmaster, and who knows where those all went. However, and you gotta love this. Now, when I listened to this, first thing I thought was, this sounds great. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Of course, it's splayed all over the place. There isn't a whole lot to splay out. You got the drums, you got the bass, you got lots of Billy Gibbons guitars. And it's really the record that defines this band. This crystallized their sound. It's got Lagrange on it, of course. But it's got some really cool songs I'd absolutely forgotten about. Such as Move Me On Down the Line, which I'm going to bet money is a Dusty Hill song. And it's like a pop song. It's not swamp boogie blues, whatever. And like these guys have had and have some scope. I love this record when I heard it. As it turns out, they never could find the master. So this particular master was taken from a mint condition 7.5 inch per second real consumer copy. And boy, that must have been in good shape, that copy, because whatever they've done to clean it up, and no doubt they've tweezed it heavily, it sounds fantastic. Maybe they're right. Maybe analog is better, but you got to tweeze it. A+, buy it anytime. Great. Okay, then of course, then there's the obligatory jazz release in this one. Now, one of these days, I guess the last one was Billy Cobham. That's jazz, isn't it? This is jazz. This is definitely jazz. And this is a weird one. Now, the Modern Jazz Quartet had a long relationship with Atlantic. They were chums with Nessie Erdogan, who produced this record. And they came up with all kinds of ideas to keep them in the studio and earning. They sold pretty consistently, but I think it's funny because this record, the concept is that they alternated between Bach and jazz. The jazz mostly being written by John Lewis. Milt Jackson writes a couple here. And I notice he takes writing credit for all the Bach pieces. The novelty of this record is that it alternates Bach and jazz, jazzy Bach, and then just jazzy jazz. The other novelty is that John Lewis plays harpsichord on some of this record, which is interesting. It's I don't know. It's nice as a change of pace. And the third thing is that there's some kind of weird ambient percussion things on a couple of songs here that got me kind of wondering what was going on. And so, of course, I look at the very limited liner notes, and I notice production coordinator Ilhan Mimiroglu. He of Finidar Records, the avant-garde classical arm of Atlantic. Yes, they had one. And he pops up in the weirdest places. He was a Turkish composer, friend of Nesui, and I suspect he's behind these strange ambient bell things. I can't remember which songs it's on again. Might be. Anyway, yeah. Precious Joy. I love this. This is how you get your royalties, kids. Precious Joy, based on the Bach chorale, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, by John Lewis. Okay. But, Bach is dead. It's in the public domain. And yes, you can take a writing credit if you do an arrangement of it. So there you go. Good for John Lewis. This is a very pleasant record. I enjoyed it all the way through. These guys were always just the epitome of good taste. Chamber jazz, if you will, maybe. And again, very reflective of this age where like Curtis Mayfield was an example too. Urban black American culture was really starting to feel some sort of pride in itself, and like they were trying to, overcome the problems that they had in American society, and just sort of better their race, if you will, and that it's kind of different now, in the age of rap and stuff. But back then it was like the end of the civil rights movement, and these guys were the voices, and so there were things like the Modern Jazz Quartet where it was genteel jazz. It wasn't gut bucket. It was jazz for people that might go to the opera, perhaps, but also it was funky. They were funky enough. So anyway, they have a place. Third in this one, I don't know what they were thinking. Beaver and Krause. Okay, this is a tiny innovation here, in that the curmudgeons at Warner Music / Rhino decided that they weren't going to rip us off too badly, so they've put 2 albums on one thing. Now, this is very white of them, because, I mean, you could put probably, I don't know how many albums in 4-channel you could put on a Blu-ray, but I'll bet it's a lot. So, okay, great, we get 2. Now, Beaver and Krause are a strange case, and I had barely paid any attention to them in my day. They did kind of cross my radar once or twice. They were responsible. Beaver and Krause were a couple of guys. Krause? I think Krause was in the Weavers briefly. They were musicians, kind of folkies, I don't know what they really were. They were kind of pros, if you will. Professional musicians. And they somehow discovered the Moog synthesizer. And came out to the West Coast with a Moog or 2, and by nook or by crook, essentially became the West Coast sales representatives for Moog music. And they started selling Moogs to people like Mickey Dolenz and I don't know who else. And through all this, they got the attention of Jack Holzman of Elektra, and he got them to do a box set, which I have somewhere, called The None Such Guide to Electronic Music by Bernie Krause and Paul Beaver. And it kind of caused a stir. People were like, wow, this is just before it switched on Bach. So the synthesizer, which, was unknown in those days. So anyways, and then switched on Bach happened, and then the synthesizer became part of the lexicon of music, if you will. So they were kind of a thing. They were kind of this thing. And so, ever the innovators, Warner Brothers Records signed them to a 3-album deal. And, what was the first album called? But the thing about these guys was, and this becomes apparent when you listen to these albums, they were Moog synthesizer salesmen. They weren't really electronic music innovators. Bernie Krause is most famous, probably, for being the guy that sold George Harrison his Moog. And when he went over to England to show him how it all worked, they recorded a segment of Bernie demonstrating it to George, and George took that and released it as part of his electronic sound record, which Bernie was kind of miffed at, because of course he didn't get any writing royalties on it. And, it might have been a nice chunk of change. Mind you, he did get to hang out with George Harrison, so there. Having said all that, what we have here is 2 very different records. Record 1 is called Gandharva. Thoughts about Gandharva. Now, this is not what you would expect. There are indeed some parts of this that are entirely composed by overdubbing synthesizers. Excellent. They're not really fantastic. They're kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Most of the music is almost easy listening. But some of it is tuneful in a funny way, and some walking by the river. Now, there's a lot of good people on this, but again, bring your magnifying glass because there's a lot of fucking tiny print in here. Who is on this again? And Mike Bloomfield is on it. Ray Brown. Who else? Ronnie Montrose? Really? What year is this? 1970, I think. Anyway, a lot of people. This must have cost a cow to make. And it came out. Oh, and the second side was recorded at Grove Cathedral. And it featured. Does it also not feature? Where am I? It's so hard to read these notes. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Jerry Mulligan is on tenor sax, and Bud Shank, I think, is on this. Anyway, Mulligan plays a bit of cool stuff. Baritone sax. Howard Roberts plays on this. Bud Shank plays alto sax. Bud Shank does a couple of nice solos on it. But ultimately, it's just kind of an album in search of a reason to exist. And there's nothing that stuck with me. I've played it twice now. It's neat. It's a definite period piece. Boy, oh boy. And then the second record was called All Good Men. And I've been doing a little research on this one because this just sank without a trace. I'd never even heard of this record. And apparently, yes, they did a quad mix for it back in the day because, Moog synthesizer salesman. And this has some cool people on it too. Bud Shank, I think, plays flute on it. But for the most part, this record is just a complete hodgepodge of stuff. It starts with a Scott Joplin song called A Real Slow Drag, which doesn't have really any synthesizer in it at all. And then it goes from strength to strength. Now, there's a problem. I can only imagine somebody at Warner Brothers said, guys, the two records didn't sell. I think Joe Smith signed these guys. I can imagine the meetings they had with him. Maybe a hit single, would be nice. So they got together with a woman that worked with Barry Manilow and Bette Midler. Of course they are. I always think Moog synthesizer when I think of those. And they put in some vocal tracks. Well, Bernie the Folky actually sings one of them, and he should not be allowed anywhere near a microphone with the intention of singing into it. And a couple of female people come and sing some, and they're bad songs. They're not good. But there's one little goofy thing on here. What's it called again? It's just so goofy. Blue Land Canyon Stomp, which I really liked. And there was one other, Between the Sun and the Rain. There's a song on here called Legend Days Are Over, which features a Aboriginal lady, and they loop her voice. And all the reviews I read said it was a really great piece. And it's at this long distance, it's not that great. It's okay. Would I have bought this? $30. This was touchy. I'm glad to own it. I'm going to keep it, of course. And I will dig it out and play that Stomp and maybe the second side of Gandharva. It's pretty cool quad. Yeah, the quad, and this is great. Now, again, Modern Jazz Quartet, that came out as a quad album. This only ever, now if you want this in quad on vinyl, bring money, because it came out as a test pressing in Japan. Only Gandharva. The other one never came out in anything. So there you go, eh? Why they chose this? Now, these records were disasters. They were flops. There's no other way to describe it. Flops. And so why they chose to put that out when there's so many... we'll go into this in a minute. Anyway, there's hope. Because if that can come up... By the way, the label on this one, again, they can't use the Warner logo. I don't know why. So they've used... Now, I will give them credit for using what I call period colors. Because the green label was about the same label, and it had the orange... Okay. Still, that's a fucking terrible label. Terrible logo. Speaking of terrible logos, you get to see it. Now, this was my free record. And DTLA. I guess that means downtown LA. I don't remember that ever being on the label. I remember it saying Burbank. So maybe that's part of the copyright deal. So there you go. The tree-lined road logo label. Now, I bought this. I thought, okay, well, I'll get this for free. What the hell? I always thought of this record as being a piece of crap. By this point, I was well and truly sick of Rod. Now, Rod has made some great records. I've got, Gasoline Alley and Every Picture Tells a Story and Never Dull Moment. I've got all those, and I think they're solid records. He's a great interpretive singer, and when he's in a groove with the right people playing with him, he's great. This record, I remember being his big commercial slick out, and it was when he left Mercury and signed for huge money with Warner Brothers, and then I sort of went, yeah, okay. Of course, the only songs I ever heard off of this, ever, were his version of Drift Away, which is actually very creditable, and, of course, Sailing, which is sort of the big song off of this, which is all right. It's just, So I never really played it. So I got this anyways. And I did some research, of course, before I got it. Turns out that his girlfriend, Britt Eklund at the time, who must have been persuasive, convinced him to make the record as a fast side and a slow side. Not a terrible idea. It's worked for other people. And so I'd never heard the fast side. The fast side's pretty damn good. He's got a band of, Booker T's, I think, on organ. And so it's a solid band. Tom Dowd came in to produce it, and they decided that this would be the first album he did that did not have the faces on it. Probably not a terrible idea. And this was right before. There you go. Dolby Master, yeah, nerds rejoice. I care less with each one. Same with this. So there's half the booklet. Well, 2/3 of the booklet wasted. Now who is on this again? Oh, David Lindley's on this. Who knew? Pete Carr, Steve Cropper, Jesse Ed Davis, who I think co-wrote one song. Jimmy Johnson, Fred Tackett. Interesting. Duck Dunn, Bob Glob, David Hood, and Lee Sklar. There's a batch of good bass players for you. Willie Correa, Roger Hawkins, Al Jackson. This is a chock-a-block. The rock and roll side is actually bloody good. Is there no? Oh, here we go. Okay, bring out the magnifying glass. Yeah, three-time loser, all in the name of rock and roll, which is the lamest title ever. But it's not bad, and it's I didn't realize on this record, but it's rock. It's rock. It's Rod rocking out with a band that isn't fucking drunk, basically, which the Faces were probably more often than not. And it's tight without being surgically tight, because Tom Dowd's there. And I never really paid attention to this record, Tom Dowd. It's actually a much better record than I thought, and I would actually say it's probably the best record he did for Warner's, and that's a lot of records. I never hated him. I mean, I've still got a 12-inch single of Do You Think I'm Sexy, which I still think was a pretty innovative song. Anyway, I was delighted to get this for free. These ended up being, like 8 of these ended up being, it was a lot, like, it's $300 Canadian. So, okay. Now, my question, I did some research myself. Okay, you're coming up with all these things that we never even knew there were quad masters of. Can we please have, okay, off the top of my head, since we can only use Warner stuff, I'm going to stick to Warner stuff, but can we please have Allman Brothers Eat a Peach? Can we please have Herbie Mann, Hold On I'm Coming, and or Push Push? I can live without reggae. Reggae's not very good. But I'll buy, hey, if it comes out, I'll buy it. Because I am that sucker. I didn't say that in the last one. I am that sucker. I will buy these fucking things as long as they put them out. And they better put them out soon, because you know what? The people that are likely to buy these are dying. So there. 10 years from now, they go, I don't know, the Quadios aren't selling anymore. You know, those people are all fucking dead. So on that happy, delightful note, I'll leave you. Because, yeah, there's more stuff to listen to that's blowing my mind. But these 2 batches of Quadios were a great opportunity to listen to stuff I don't normally go. Like Curtis Mayfield and the Spinners and Rod Stewart and Piefer and Krause. And the Modern Jazz Quartet. I found 2 Modern Jazz Quartet CDs in recent months, and I don't normally run into them. So that's the joy of collecting records and things, is that if your scope is wide enough, you'll find stuff that forces you to engage with these artists. And like I say, now looks like I'm going on a Curtis Mayfield kick. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and all that. Then we'll notify you when there's new stuff, and we will get back at you with more later. Thanks for watching.